welcome to Manage Engine Insights videocast. I'm Atira Jaikumar, an evangelist at Manage Engine, and I'll be your host for this episode. So today we're going to be talking about ITIL 4. So ITIL has been adopted by organizations around the world to streamline their IT service management practices since its evolution in the 1980s. In the latest version, ITIL talks about co-creating value from a service management perspective. It emphasizes on the importance of stakeholder collaboration for co-creating value. So ITIL can be considered to be a very modernized framework because unlike the ITIL other versions, ITIL 4 talks about co-creating value and it also aligns with the new ways of working like agile, lean, DevOps, and it supports the latest technologies like cloud and more. So during the course of this video cast, we'll try to understand more about the new concepts of ITIL 4, why organizations should adopt it, and the benefits of adopting the ITIL 4 framework. To help us with this, we have none other than the co-author of ITIL herself. So without further ado, let me introduce Katrina McDermott. So Katrina is the ITIL co-author, ITIL master, and global ambassador. She's also the Axelos consulting partner and ITSM assessor. With a solid background in designing and implementing innovative support processes across multiple sectors, including the airline and telecommunications, Katrina believes that we should design processes that include human consideration and as a world a standard practice. And she's also created this framework called as human-centered ITIL service design, which essentially puts the human element into the ITIL design and processes. So hello, Katrina. Thank you so much for joining with us today.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. So shall we get started?
Let's get started.
Okay. So the first question is, it is important for the creators of a framework to update it regularly to keep up with the modern technologies, right? So ITIL 4 is similar to ITIL 3, but some of the concepts have been reorganized or restructured to fit better into today's environment. So what are the factors that led to the upgradation of ITIL V3? And has the DevOps, agile, and lean approaches influenced the development of ITIL 4?
Yes, certainly. And there's just a few things to clarify to our listeners and viewers. You sort of alluded to the fact, so obviously we had earlier versions of ITIL, starting at version 1, version 2, version 3. We have ITIL 4, and we actually don't say ITIL version 4, it's just ITIL 4. Why is that so? Because it's a framework that will continue to evolve, I should say. So I like to explain to my students and peers that we don't say Agile version 1 or Agile version 2, it's Agile, and that's a concept behind ITIL 4. And it has changed. See, I like to say it's the same, but very different. And there is a lot of different things within the ITIL 4 framework, but also things that are still very much the same. And I like to say there's many aspects within ITIL version 3 that if you are still using technology, an older type of technology, and if you're not using modern ways of working, such as Agile and DevOps, well, ITIL version 3 is still very, very applicable. However, if you are moving, which most organizations are, I sometimes controversially say ITIL version 3 is no longer relevant if you have moved on. And I give examples that service level management in ITIL version 3, there was no such thing as cloud technology. So in ITIL version 3, we taught and trained students how to write service level agreements, how to negotiate service level agreements. Well, in cloud, they're actually not typically negotiable. So how service level management looks in ITIL 4 is very, very different, because in ITIL version 3, you did negotiate your service levels because the technology was different. But in ITIL 4, that's typically they're out of the box and you don't negotiate them. So that's an example of sometimes ITIL version 3 is very relevant, but in other ways it's not.
Okay, so that's why we had to move to ITIL 4, I guess, because it's the most, important or relevant thing now.
Exactly, it is, because as we said, technology has changed.
Yeah.
Cloud, as an example, we have changed the way we worked. ITIL version 3 is 20
Oh,
years old, or nearly 20
yeah.
years old, and most of my students hadn't even been born then. So not most, but a lot of my students. So we've really changed since ITIL version 2 and 3, and it is now reflecting a modern way of working, a modern workplace, how we deal with our suppliers. It is, as you said, it is about co-creation of value. I think that in earlier versions of the framework, it was very much this, master-slave relationship with our suppliers, but now and our users in the business. But now it is about working together with the business and with suppliers, and in fact, with all stakeholders, as you said.
Yeah. So that brings me to my second question. Since the pandemic, there's been this shift in the way organizations think. So organizations today are looking for a very flexible framework that will help them thrive in the modern service economy. So how would you position ITIL 4 in today's modern IT organization?
Well, I think what a lot of organizations mistakenly do is try to transform to adopt to this new way of working since COVID. And what we're finding time and time again is that a lot of these transformations or improvements, whatever we want to call them, simply don't get the outcomes that were expected. And that is because a lot of organizations don't have the maturity to do that. So I'll give an example. A lot of organizations might get new tooling, new service management tooling, but they don't have the culture, they don't have the infrastructure. When I say that, they don't have a CMDB that can support what these modern tooling can do. So we're finding a lot of companies are jumping, wanting to be modern, and in fact, it's actually fairly, most of the time, not successful. So we say, and ITIL 4 would advocate this, start from where you are. That's a guiding principle. Understand where you are. And so that's why we do these baseline maturity assessments, and then do your roadmap. So, you don't plan a trip without knowing where you are and how you're going to get there. But a lot of service management transformations to meet the new way of working just go without really understanding that you've got to go slowly and understand. I'll go back to the 4 dimensions of service management in ITIL 4. We've got to understand your people, your culture, your tooling, what data, your suppliers, and also what processes and value streams you have in place.
So I think the guiding principle in ITIL 4 to an extent reinforces this, right? Like you mentioned, start from where you are. So
Yeah.
I think organizations should look at their maturity and then focus on what to do next.
Absolutely. And we find that if you don't do that, as I said, the expected outcomes of improving or transformation simply do not work.
Understood. Again, like you mentioned, one of the significant changes of ITIL 4 compared to ITIL 3 is its focus on value creation. So the definition of service in itself has been updated. It's changed from means of delivering value to means of co-creating value. Why this language? What promoted this change of language?
Because I think, as I alluded to just earlier, is that we created this master-slave relationship. We delivered value. Here you go. I hope you like it. I'm sorry if you don't. Rather than saying, actually, you have to help us be successful. So it's going to the business and working with them. And I think it makes us design better services, because it forces us to go and understand who our stakeholders are and how they perceive value. I think, and again, I'll be a bit controversial here. I think we always thought how we did service management earlier was the right way and the only way. We followed best practice. And I'm a big advocate that, in fact, I don't think we did a great job, because in our research, we find that most people in the business don't value IT. They don't really have much positive things to say about IT. I always like to give the scenario that when I do conferences, I ask the audience either virtually or put on a post-it note, what do you think the business thinks of IT? And invariably, it is a negative response. Invariably. Complex, slow, expensive, not understanding. And very rarely can you find that positive word. we get improving quite a lot, but improving means it's not good in the first place. So what this means is that it's now forcing us in IT to go to the business and asking them how they perceive value. And it's not like we're giving you great value because we're giving you a single point of contact to call IT. We used to think that was great value. Well, in fact, is that what the business wants? And a lot of times we find no, they don't want to go through the single point of contact. So again, it's that co-creation, and then realizing that they are also responsible, and that's what ITIL 4 says, for the outcome.
So yeah, it's like a give and take approach. You can benefit and I can benefit.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Again, one of the important things in ITIL 4 are the 4 dimensions, right? 4 dimensions can be seen as an evolution of the 4 Ps in ITIL V3. And these 4 dimensions are the ingredients needed to create high quality products and services, and they influence each other. So in ITIL 4, they say that the 4 dimensions should be looked from beyond a traditional IT perspective and taken of more holistic approach, right? So can you elaborate more on these 4 dimensions and how they influence each other? Because as far as I know, a slightest change in one dimension can, cause a huge impact on the other. So can you explain more on this?
I would say it's forced us to look at, as you said, a holistic view of service management. And even though we did have the 4 Ps in earlier versions of ITIL, in my experience, we didn't really consider them. We knew they were there, but we just followed, we wrote processes and that's what we did. Whereas quite often if a client is doing tooling, for example, and I'll say, well, what about the people experience using it? And quite often I will get, that's not our responsibility, Katrina. And I'm like, it is your responsibility, because what we do is we tend to create, I'll just say, for example, a portal in an IT service management tool that we want our users to log a ticket with. And I'll say, so what type of people will be logging the tickets? Oh, a user. No. What type of people will be? Are they tech savvy? Do they have access to the internet? Will they understand that drop-down list box? So that's the first dimension. Think of people. And I say to all of my students and clients, start with dimension 1. I mean, we say they're of equal importance, but the way that they've been depicted, meaning that the people and organizations is first, was deliberate, because it is about people and culture and the organization's maturity. I'll go to that again. So again, I will say, in my older or earlier years of service management, I would not have thought about things like that. I absolutely wouldn't. I would have just gone, here it is, here's a portal, I've finished. And then so now we then move on to suppliers. This is a really good example as well. How are our suppliers going to integrate once a ticket's logged? I used to say, that's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
So again, it's forcing us to look. And I think the 4 dimensions of service management is, and making it so prominent in the foundational learnings of service management in ITIL, is probably one of the most powerful things within ITIL 4, to force us to have that realistic picture. And then the 4th dimension is the data. Well, what are you going to do with that data once someone's logged a ticket? I always ask my students, who actually owns the data in a service management tool? Oh, I don't know. What are you going to do with it? There's a lot of rich information in our service management tool that we do nothing with. So as I said, it just forces us to have that 4 dimensions holistic view of anything that we do in service management now.
Understood. It's like, again, it's taking that holistic view and understanding what we're doing, who we are dealing with and everything, right? Yeah. So it makes sense. It's very progressive, that space. Like you mentioned in your earlier days, you might, like we IT people might not have thought of it, but now it's here.
That's right. And then I always bring that up, 4 dimensions of service management. But you didn't mention in my very nice introduction, thank you for that we incorporate human-centered design into service management. And for our listeners that aren't aware of what human-centered design is, we can do another podcast on that, but a webinar. But at a very high level, human-centered design is a philosophy or a framework or an approach to designing an experience. And at the heart of human-centered design is humans and empathy. And I think that that's really important. And in human-centered design, we have some more Ps. You know, you mentioned the 4 Ps. We also consider the place. So the place of where, again, I'll use the analogy or scenario of someone contacting the service desk. Where are they? I mean, we used to design service management assuming everybody was sitting on a desk. And in fact, a lot of the times, you know, we have frontline staff that are not at a desk, that they're in a different place. And another P that human-centered design would consider, starting to consider, is planet. So this is where we start looking at sustainability of your management. Yeah. And we used to go, why would you think of the planet and sustainability in service management? And ITIL 4 has recently released a new module, I'm not sure if you know, called Sustainability in IT and Digital. And it's a fabulous module, and I'm actually certified to train in it. And what it is that us in IT service management have a huge impact on sustainability and how we design our services. And we don't think we do, but we do, because everybody is using technology now. So we have to write coding. We have to ensure that how we store data, because with the cloud, that's using electricity, you know, all that thing we now have to think of. And it's a fascinating topic, actually. So I was so pleased to have the opportunity I presented on that recently in Australia, and the response was fantastic. And so, as I said, you know, we're actually authorized to train in sustainability now, and I think everybody in IT should actually do the course, because it's very important. So going back to the Ps, so in human-centered design, there are a couple more Ps outside the traditional 4 Ps in service management.
Okay, that sustainability angle, I know about it. It's extremely interesting, like you mentioned. Actually, that brings me to the next question. It's about customers, because understanding the customer's needs and values that they want to derive from the service is very crucial. Like you said, without understanding that, there's a huge chance that the design service will fail to satisfy their needs, and it might result in wastage of resources. If you link it to sustainability, again, wastage of resources and opportunities gone waste, right? So ITIL is, like you said, it's taking a human-centered approach, and it focuses on understanding the customers and the experiences. So how will an experience-led approach lead to co-creating and co-creating value?
I think that it's not just ITIL, it's like a lot of organizations are now, we have to focus on our customer and our experience. So it's certainly something that is very prominent now in a lot of organizations. But I challenge that, because, you know, when a manager or the CIO says we need to be more customer focused, I mean, what does that actually mean? It means different things to different people. And in IT, I again, probably controversially will say that we are not trained to be customer focused. We're trained to be great at designing IT processes and fixing servers and writing code, but very rarely do we understand what customer focus means. So I'm really passionate about ensuring that we have the skills to do that. And so, yes, absolutely, ITIL says, you know, understand what your customers want, but there's tools and techniques to do that. And certainly in my career, in my early days when I was a business analyst in IT, I would write user requirements. I would write them down, and I look back in horror, because that was such a bad way to find out what the user wants. You know, I would ask, what do you want? Well, in design thinking, you actually don't ask people what they want, because a lot of the time they don't know, or they won't tell you because they're either shy or they're not very tech savvy. So it's all about working with your stakeholders and customers, and using techniques such as we said, empathy, walking in their shoes, as you said, understanding them, and not assuming that what we traditionally say is best practice is best. You know, I often say to IT people, when was the last time you logged a ticket on the service desk? Never. So let's try and see how you feel, and let's do that. And it's very powerful when you use these techniques that, you know, ITIL is now advocating, to think about the customer and walk in their shoes. And, you know, so how do you feel if you've sent an email to a closed store or something that you've bought, and they haven't got back to you for 3 weeks? And I'm like, well, that's what a P3 ticket's doing. So how do you think that feels? Whereas I think before, and I was guilty on it, that's P3, it doesn't matter, who cares? But at the end of, we teach that at the end of every ticket, there is a person and an experience. And we have to start, again, is using priority 3 a good way to deal with tickets? Maybe not. And this is where we start looking at different ways of working and looking at service management.
That's also a very, very fascinating topic, right? Understanding the person who's, writing to you, or maybe just stepping in their shoes and understanding the person and then working on. So I think we are getting there with ITIL 4, because it's more focused on, humans, and it's taking this whole new approach. So hopefully it works.
Yeah, and look, as I said, I say it's not the magic formula, but it's certainly the entry book into it. Because,
yeah,
exactly. But there is still very solid ways of working out there. It's still, one support team doesn't talk to another support team, and the ticket gets, and so when we start introducing, hey guys, think, because a lot of companies will say we're using ITIL 4. You don't actually use ITIL 4. You adopt and adapt it, and when I see that type of behavior, that is not ITIL 4 aligned at all. It's about taking responsibility, stop working in silos, think about the customer. And again, this traditional approach of level 3 people not ringing the customer, why? So we start questioning all of that now as we're turning it around. Yeah.
Okay. So again, it's around, next question is also around the things that we've been talking about. Organizations often fail to meet the business expectations of customers, and it gives rise to something called as watermelon SLAs, right? So ITIL 4 highlights the watermelon effect of SLAs. Just so that everybody knows, basically watermelon SLAs whereby the service provider's metrics are constantly meeting the defined targets, but the customer still remains dissatisfied. So can you shed some light on this, Katrina, like what the watermelon effect of SLAs is and how ITIL 4 can help avoid this?
So I've actually wrote a paper on the very topic about watermelon reporting. And again, what we're measuring, we're not measuring the right things. And so we're getting, as you said, we might be meeting these targets, but the outcome was not achieved. And I'm going to give I usually have a slide, so I hope it comes across okay, but there's a saying I like to use that a doctor comes out of surgery and he said, the operation was a success, but the patient died. And that's a bit like watermelon reporting. We've met all this, but in fact, it didn't achieve the outcome. And so again, another example I use is I hate the availability metric. Example, this is a true example. I worked at an airline, and the bag tags were printing the wrong destination, but there was no service level met because the system was available and the response time was met. So there was no breach of SLA, but the system wasn't meeting the outcome of printing correct bag tags. And so what ITIL 4 is saying is go out and understand what the outcome of the IT service or business service is trying to achieve and measure that. And it's not easy. In fact, it's very hard, but that doesn't mean it's not impossible. It's not possible. Because a lot of the times, and this is our approach to adopting and adapting this new way of doing service levels, is understanding, as I said, what the business does. So again, I'll use the example of an airline. A business, we call them business value streams, is check-in passenger, a plane leaving on time, we call that on-time performance. It could be providing lounge access, ensuring the passenger gets the correct meal. So these are outcomes now, the business value streams. And if we can report in IT against that, then we're seeing the value that we're bringing. And rather than reporting to the business, we had 10% less incidents this month. I mean, who cares? Who cares about that? The business doesn't care if you got, I mean, they're paying us to do a job and we're saying, oh, we're not as broken as we were last week. What we should be reporting is that there were no passengers, baggage lost. There were no flight delays. Every passenger got their correct meal. They're the sort of metrics that we should be reporting against. And as I said, not easy, but it doesn't mean it can't be done, because if we keep measuring the same thing, as I said, that the catering application, again, might have been available, but all the passengers got the wrong meal. That's not the right way to do it. So it's, again, working with the business. And what I love about this approach, it just means that people in IT start to understand what your business does, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people in IT, it could be very transient. They're only going to work there for a year or so. A lot of the times, especially again in my career, we were kind of discouraged from speaking to the business. Why did you speak to the business? That's not your job. So by having these business value streams as part of your DNA in IT, it allows, as I said, the people in IT to understand what the business does and to understand impacts on making that change on that catering application. It actually will impact a passenger's experience.
That's a very, practical experience that you shared. It's not just enough to understand the technical stuff or just stick to the very, focus metrics, but rather understand who you're working with and look at what they want so that you can meet or make them happy. That is also an SLA, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it comes down, well, I don't think it does come down from leadership, because I also give the scenario that there's a famous story that of JFK, the former president of the United States. He visited NASA, the rocket launching location, and there was a janitor. I don't know if you know this story, and he said to the janitor, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm the president, what are you doing?" And the janitor replied, "I'm helping put man on the moon." And why I love that story and telling it to IT professionals is because we forget what we do and why we're doing it. And the janitor knew his place. He was actually helping it. So when I ask IT professionals what they do, I invariably get my responses are, I write code, I back up servers, I do the latest software patches. Very rarely do I hear IT people say, I enable people to fly. I help patients in hospital get the right medication. That's actually what we're doing in IT. We are enabling a business outcome, and we are so far removed. We just think about the technology, not what we're trying to enable. And that's like my approach and my company's approach of training and consulting and ITIL and IT service management.
Okay, Katrina, ITIL 4 introduces service value system concept, right? And it's intended to provide a very high level of everything that's needed to co-create value. How can organizations benefit from the service value system?
I think it's, again, going back to that holistic view of just make sure you think of everything rather than just, one dimension. And again, the service value system, one of the components within there is governance, for example. I mean, I know myself, I was really bad at governance. But now, because ITIL's introducing this in the introduction teachings of ITIL 4, it actually, for all IT professionals, we need to think about all of these components. We need to think about continual improvement, which is another component of the service value system. If you don't continually improve, you'll be left behind. And that's the idea of it. And I just say, it's just this holistic view. Look down and make sure that you're including all of those components within this, your practices and your governance, as you said, continual improvement. Yeah. And always starting with value, always ending in value, always ending in value. Yeah.
Also, the service value system talks about service value stream mapping, right? So are there any tools or techniques that can be used for mapping the service value, and can we optimize the service value?
Yes, certainly. So within the service value system, we have the service value chain. So that's the heart of it. And so we're digging into it now. And within the service value chain, if you go down to another level, we actually, and again, this is our approach to ITIL 4, we actually create service value streams. It might sound complex, and it's not. It's just very different, very, very different to how we're traditionally working. And I personally love it. And I always say to IT professionals now, you do not implement processes or practices, you implement value streams. And if I may, just to our audience, give an example of how there's no right or wrong. It's just how you adopt it and adapt it. So in our way of doing service value chain and stream mapping is, an example is we call it issue to resolution. So that's at the highest level. That's your value chain, issue to resolution. And then within there, you'll have a service value stream. So that's a service value stream might be fixed on first. Another value stream might be level 2. Another value stream would be level 3. And so what we typically used to do, we just used to do the incident management process. That was it. But if we break it down, and again, that's an ITIL 4, break it down, think and work holistically. And you also use things from agile, fail fast, fail often, but break it down into small pieces. And fixed on first is very different to a ticket going to level 2, because again, look at the 4 dimensions of service management. You need different skills. You need different technology. If it goes to level 2, you'd have to start introducing your suppliers, dimension 3. And so we're really, our approach to ITIL is ensuring that we break it down and get the right outcome per value stream. Because again, if you look at the 4 dimensions, they will be different for each type of level of a ticket. And what is so very different about this concept is that, as I said, you don't implement processes, you implement value streams, but your value streams call on your practices. So again, I like to give an analogy that the 34 practices in ITIL 4 are like herbs and spices in your pantry. And you access them depending on what you're cooking. So your value stream is what you're cooking. So for level 1, fixed on first, you would need knowledge management, and you need a lot of it. For level 1, you wouldn't need service level management typically. For level 1, you wouldn't need risk management. But if you go to level 2, you start getting these practices from your pantry. Again, you would need service level management. You will need probably a bit of risk management, certainly again knowledge management, etc. So it is taking very small approaches to your designer services.
I like the example, herbs and spices from the pantry. That's I think everybody will be able to relate to it. So break down everything, take what you require, have the right mix to deliver what you really want.
Exactly. And so they're all sitting in the pantry, and they're all working together, making sure that they're all available for us when we need them. Because in ITIL version 3, we just do incident management, and then we just do knowledge management, very siloed. But now the outcome of the value stream is the value chain is to get our users back to being productive. That's what incident management is, get back to being productive. And how do we do that?
So it's all focused on value, and it sounds really great. One other thing is we have a lot of other frameworks, right? Apart from ITIL, there's COBIT, there's TOGAF, there's MOF. But these organizations, right, they're looking for one single framework to manage all their services. Is this practically possible?
No.
That's the answer. No.
Because as I think that ITIL doesn't do everything, neither does one framework do everything. And ITIL, it complements them all. I think ITIL's strength is the governance, again, if you will, and the maintenance and the improvement of the IT service. Because a lot of the times when these products or apps, what do we want to call them, a design, from the front of the screen, they look great. But from the back, the support and maintenance is very often forgotten, very often. Yeah. And so this is where ITIL, I think the strength comes in as well, of ensuring that those products and services are being maintained, that they're still delivering value, or co-creating value, I should say. And I will say that one thing I am, just to go back to your previous question, if you don't mind, one thing I'm very passionate about is that, we talk about experience of our users, and that's very important. But what is also very important is the experience of our IT professionals. I like to give the scenario, we often say, how do our customers feel when they have to wait 15 minutes for their call to be answered? Well, how does the service desk analyst feel when there's a long queue? How does the service desk analyst feeling when they're working with tooling that's been poorly designed? It's about ensuring that it's everybody's experience, not just the customer or user.
I think it's very relevant, very, very relevant, because it needs to be bidirectional, and it needs to focus on both the customers as well as, you know, the technicians, because again,
Exactly.
experience of both of these people matters, right? At the end of the day, for value creation,
Absolutely.
and value creation itself is co-creating value.
Yep.
So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's really interesting when we do, start talking to service desk analysts and to support staff, and we say, what motivates you? And we empathize with them. And you actually find out some really, really cool things about people that you wouldn't normally. And I like to give an example. I interviewed, just as part of his skills assessment, a service desk analyst, and he said he loves watching the queue ticket volume go down, loves it. And he said that when he goes to a football game, he doesn't watch the game, he watches the score. And yeah, and so to me, I'm like, well, you'd be really good at problem management. And so those tickets that would be hard to, we give them to him. So it's really looking at it from, as you said, a two-way lens, ensuring that it's not just the users that are happy, it's also the staff, IT professionals.
That is interesting. And coming to the last question, it's been almost 3 years since the release of ITIL 4. So do you think ITIL 4 has achieved what it has set out for, and what do you have to say about the future of ITIL?
I think it's a great question to end on. Has it achieved everything? I think it's achieved the ability for us to start thinking differently in service management. I think it's achieved that. I think the adoption and the interpretation, I think we still need to work on that, and I'm doing a lot of work on that. I think sometimes the essence of ITIL 4 is misunderstood. It's either we have to use ITIL 3 or ITIL 4. That's absolutely not what it is about. It's about, I think that ITIL 4 is really about be brave. Yeah. And think differently. As long as, you've got your service value system, as long as you keep within your boundaries and your controls. But yeah, as I said, think differently and be brave. And the book is there to guide you, if you will. Yeah.
So it's like the stepping stone. And like you mentioned, it's new and people are trying out the approach, but we're just getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. But ITIL 4 is not a recipe book. And I think I think earlier versions of ITIL was. So people are looking for a recipe book, and it's not a recipe book. It is, as I said, you've got all these tools that your pantry, all of that. And it's like, just, do what works, understand your 4 dimensions, understand your people, understand your technology, and do what works. That's what ITIL 4 is about. Yeah.
And anything about the future of ITIL in itself, like where are we going, or how are we trying to expand on ITIL 4?
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, ITIL 4, this is it, and it'll just keep evolving. And again, as I mentioned, there's been 2 modules recently released called Sustainability for IT and Digital. And then another module is Managing and Acquiring Cloud Services. That's another 3-day course that has recently been released. So courses and modules and more education will just continue to be part of the framework as we now know as ITIL 4.
Okay, Katrina, with that, we have come to the end of today's session. It's been really informative. I mean, I've learned so much, and I'm pretty sure that our audience has also learned a lot, because the one on sustainability, your examples with the recipe, the herbs and spice and everything was very informative, as well as it was fun to learn.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to have the opportunity. And I've really enjoyed it, actually. I can't believe the time, how it's flying.
So yeah, we have understood that ITIL 4 acknowledges how the world of business is changing, how the world of technology is changing. It focuses on humans, and it reinforces the fact that customers as well as technicians have a role to play in value creation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. If you have any feedback or any questions, please leave them in the comment section, and we'll get back to you at the earliest. So yeah, stay tuned for our next session. And thank you, Katrina. Thank you once again.
Thank you.